There have been several decade-defining historical events that happened across the world and affected every individual, but some happened in specific countries. Some of these historic events helped in shaping the future of these countries, which made them how they are currently. America has always been a center of interest in the world, as it is considered a super powerful country. There were several defining historic events that will never be wiped out of the minds of many Americans. Here are the 10 must-known historical events that happened in America. 1. The American Revolutionary War. Great Britain was the colonists of America for several decades before they fought for their independence. On 19th April 1775, the American Revolutionary War, or the American War of Independence, began. This was a major war of the American Revolution. The American Revolutionary War is considered to be the war that helped America secure its independence. On 2nd June 1776, Congress voted to declare independence from Great Britain, even though the war continued till 3rd September 1783. The American patriots during the Revolutionary War got support from the Kingdom of France, with lesser support from the Dutch Republic and the Spanish Empire. This conflict occurred in North America, the Caribbean, and the Atlantic Ocean. 2. The Declaration of Independence. The American Revolutionary War was very important in American history, as this led to the Declaration of Independence in America. Declaration of Independence took place in 1776 and led to several developments in the country, which was under the colonial rule of Great Britain. There was an adoption by the Continental Congress on 4th July 1776, with the 13 American colonies severing their political connections to Great Britain. The American colonists were able to make a confirmation of an official alliance with the government of France and obtained their support in the course of the Revolutionary War. 3. Formulation of the Constitution. After the war was won by America, there was a need to formulate rules and laws that will govern the people. That is how the Constitution of the United States of America, which is the fundamental law of the federal system of government, was documented. During the summer of 1787, the Constitution was written in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. 55 delegates met at the Constitutional Convention later to amend the Articles of Confederation, which was the first written constitution. However, the Constitution of America was thought to be a product of political compromise, which came up after debates on issues such as states' rights, representation, and slavery. Finally, a more direct and equal constitution was formulated. 4. The Whiskey Rebellion. Beginning in 1791, the Whiskey Rebellion, or the Whiskey Insurrection, was a violent tax protest after the whiskey tax was imposed on a domestic product by the newly formed government. The Whiskey Rebellion came to an end in 1794 during the presidency of George Washington. During this period, beer was difficult to transport as it used to spoil more easily than rum and whiskey. Farmers who resided in the western frontier used to distill their surplus rye, barley, wheat, corn, or fermented grain mixtures to whiskey. The majority were war veterans who resisted the tax. Several rebels were arrested by the army but later acquitted, with the new government being impressed with the servicemen. The whiskey tax was later repealed by the Jefferson administration. 5. 1803 purchase of Louisiana. More than 800,000 square miles of the Louisiana Territory made up the western Mississippi Basin. This territory passed from French colonial rule to Spanish colonial rule and back to the French before it was returned to the US. In 1803, then-President Jefferson pried off the Louisiana Territory from Napoleon for a price of $27 million. Out of the Louisiana Territory, the following states were formed: Louisiana, Missouri, Arkansas, Iowa, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Kansas, Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, and Minnesota. 6. Battle of New Orleans. This battle was fought on 8th January 1815 between the British Army, who was under Major General Sir Edward Pakenham, and the US Army under Brevet Major General Andrew Jackson. Britain had tried to take New Orleans, West Florida, and Louisiana Territory. Numerous skirmishes and artillery duels took place in the weeks until the final battle. The British Army had an advantage over the US due to their numbers, training, and experience, but the US Army defeated them easily. Americans suffered 71 casualties, while the British suffered 2,000, including the deaths of their commander and his second-in-command. 1,823. Monroe Doctrine. Between 1815 and 1825, Americans enjoyed prosperity and isolationism. However, then-President James Monroe decided to articulate a set of principles in 1823 which would later be known as the Monroe Doctrine. The doctrine articulated that the United States would not intervene in European affairs and would not tolerate further European colonization in the Americas. It also stated that the US will not tolerate European interference in the governments of the American hemisphere. However, the doctrine was later implemented. 8. Era of the Common Man. Then President Andrew Jackson ruled from 1829 to 1837 inches, what was known as the Era of the Common Man. Suffrage had been broadly expanded beyond men of property, which was not a result of the efforts of the president. Jackson propagated his image as a champion of popular democracy and as a man of the people. However, he aligned himself with the influential and not with the have-nots, as well as with the creditor and not the debtor. He delivered little to the people on the street, as many had expected. 9. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Also known as the Treaty of Peace, Friendships, Limits, and Settlement between the USA and the United Mexican States, this peace treaty was signed on 2nd February 1848. It was signed in the Villa de Guadalupe Hidalgo between the US and Mexico, bringing an end to the Mexican-American War. The Mexican army had been defeated, prompting the nation to engage in negotiations with the US to end the war. Some factions of the Mexican side never conceded defeat and were against the treaty. The United States had to pay US $15 million to Mexico and a further US $5 million to pay off claims of American citizens against Mexico. Mexico gave the United States the Rio Grande as a boundary for Texas and the ownership of California, Nevada, Utah, and Colorado, as well as most area of New Mexico. The Mexicans who lived in these areas had the choice of relocating with Mexico's new boundaries or receiving American citizenship. 10. 1857. Dred Scott Decision. 1,850 seconds. Were tough as the American Civil War was experienced. There was the compromise of 1,850 that temporarily forestall north-south extensions to John Brown's Harper's Ferry raid. Abolitionist indignation led to an increasingly polarized country. The United States Supreme Court's Dred Scott decision set the ground for the 1,860 election of Abraham Lincoln as president. This decision ultimately precipitated secession and war,